Rome wasn't built in a day, but it sure liked watching people die while trying. Now it's time to leave the shadows of the training yard and step into the glaring lights of the Colosseum. We hope you enjoyed learning about the world of Roman gladiators and the terrifying reality of the arena. Don't forget to hit the like button for more videos and leave a comment below with your thoughts on this epic showdown. Until next time, stay curious and keep exploring history. Welcome to the arena. Here, the rules are simple. Fight or die. Sometimes both. Being a Roman gladiator was like being an action movie star in real life, except with fewer retakes and more broken bones. And now that our favorite captive combatants are ready for prime time, it's time to explore what really went down in the most famous amphitheaters of the ancient world. But before we dive into the madness, here's a little secret. The Colosseum wasn't actually called the Colosseum. We call it that today because it was built near the Colosseum of Caesar, which was torn down ages ago. Back in the day, it was simply known as the Flavian Amphitheater? No, wait, don't tell me. I already know what you're thinking. How did this baby get built anyway? Well, you can thank a guy named Vespasian for that. After becoming emperor in 69 AD, he commissioned this massive project, which would become a symbol of Roman power and an eternal monument to his family's greatness. Construction began in 70 AD after the Jewish revolt and used the spoils of war to pay for it. 8 years later, under Titus, the amphitheater opened its doors to the public with 100 days of games, a gift to the people of Rome to keep them happy and distracted. The entire structure was a spectacle in itself. Made of stone and concrete, it could hold up to 80,000 spectators. It took over 10,000 slaves to erect it, and the result was a marvel of Roman engineering and design. It had 4 stories, each with a different architectural theme. Each entrance was grandly named after something. So let's take a tour. Gate A was the Arch of Titus, commemorating its opening. Gate B was the Arch of Severus, named after the emperor who completed construction. Gate C was the Arch of the Beggars. Because why not? And Gate D was the Arch of the Spoils. That's because it displayed captured enemy standards, including the legendary shields of the Argives. Each archway represented a different aspect of Rome's greatness, and each section inside was designed to amplify the experience. The bottom level had 4 main entrances and housed shops and public bathrooms. Yep, you heard that right. Public bathrooms. Level 2 was the first seating area, separated into 2 sections. One for senators and local elites and another for everyone else. As you climbed higher, things got rowdier. Level 3 was the cheap seats, standing room only. Food vendors crowded the stairs. Making their way to the top was a gamble. You navigated the masses, dodging elbows, stale urine, and maybe a stray scorpion. Level 4 was the best view in the house, the royal box. Emperor and his guests watched from here, far from the mess but close enough to see. No wonder every leader wanted to be seen here. The upper levels were pure chaos. Women sat together in the matronalia section, while the rest of the stands were a mixed bag of social classes, ages, and attitudes. Spectators were loud, opinionated, and not afraid to show it. If you offended someone here, you might end up missing the next game with a broken nose or worse. It was a sea of faces, emotions, and potential danger. And below all of this stood the arena floor, the stage for all the action. This was a complex structure, able to rise and fall, revealing different levels and even underwater sections for naval battles. Trapdoors and hidden pits could spring up to ensnare unsuspecting fighters or add a sudden twist to chariot races. It was a combination of skill, spectacle, and trickery that amazed the crowds. And it wouldn't be Rome without a little bit of gore. As the emperor and the elite entered through the arches of Titus and Septimus, the commoners clamored into the stands. For them, there was only one archway, the Arch of the Beggars. Yeah, that was their actual name, and they had to go through it. It was a reminder of their place in society, and also a warning to stay quiet and behave. If you made trouble, you got kicked out. Simple as that. And since the games were basically free therapy sessions for the Roman psyche, the threat of leaving without your head was pretty effective. But now it was time for the show. The crowd roared, eager for blood and entertainment. As the caged beasts were paraded around the stands, The anticipation reached fever pitch. Lions paced their cages, tigers snarled, and the people of Rome held their breath. When the gate to the arena floor creaked open, the first condemned walked out. His hands were bound, his face was pale, and fear radiated off him. He wasn't a wild animal, but he might as well have been. He didn't know what lay ahead, but he knew his chances of survival were slim. Before the fight started, there was a ritual, a moment of truth. The condemned raised his head high and awaited his fate. From the royal box, the emperor signaled thumbs up or thumbs down, deciding whether the condemned would live or die. The crowd echoed the emperor's decision, their voices thundering across the Colosseum. Whether the fighter lived or died, the moment was etched in history. The condemned had faced his fate, stared the lion in the eye, and shown the Romans what courage looked like. The next moments were pure chaos. Lions pounced, gladiators swung, and the roar of the crowd drowned out any screams. The air grew thick with the smell of blood and sweat, and the sight of human and beast locked in mortal combat fascinated the audience. People held their breath as the condemned fought for his life. Every swing of the sword, every parry, every lunge was a testament to his will to survive. But the odds were stacked against him. The lion was faster, stronger, more ruthless. Its eyes burned with primal hunger, and its claws tore into the condemned as he stumbled backward. The crowd leaned forward, eager for the kill. Finally, with a last desperate lunge, the condemned managed to wound the lion. Blood trickled down its side, and the beast roared in pain and anger. The condemned collapsed, exhausted and bleeding, as the lion circled him, sizing up its wounded pride. The crowd was silent for a moment, stunned by the unexpected turn of events. The emperor in the royal box signaled for mercy. The lion was to spare the condemned, but would it listen? The beast snarled, baring its teeth, then suddenly bolted out of the arena. It paused briefly, turning to regard the fallen fighter, before disappearing into the tunnel. Relief washed over the condemned as he realized he had survived, but he knew it was only a reprieve. The next match was his and the audience wanted blood. Cheers and jeers echoed through the amphitheater as the condemned prepared for his next fight. Trapped between the deadly lions and the relentless crowd, he knew his journey through the arena had just begun. To celebrate 100 days of games, the organizers pulled out all the stops. For the final event, the emperor himself, Titus, joined the festivities. The crowd erupted as the emperor took his place in the royal box, his presence adding a layer of importance to the games. The emperor's personal gladiator emerged onto the floor. He was larger than life, a skilled fighter, and Titus's personal representative of power. What followed was a display of martial prowess as the gladiator dispatched his opponents with speed and accuracy. The crowd roared with appreciation for each well-executed move. The gladiator had put on a show, and the emperor had witnessed it firsthand. As the last opponent fell, the crowd rose to its feet, showering the emperor's gladiator with praise. The cheers echoed through the Colosseum as Titus acknowledged the adoration with a gracious wave. The gladiator had done his duty, entertaining the crowds and showcasing the might of Rome. The 100-day games had come to an end. Thank you for joining us on this journey back in time. You owe me 200 denarii. Aren't you listening to me? I said you owe me 200 denarii, so let me get it straight. All this work for nothing. Do you want nothing? Nothing. Yeah, I think that's fair. Fine. You want nothing? You shall get nothing. You know, one thing about Romans, they love their games. Over 1,000 men passed through my academy in a single year. Back in Athens, I used to eat sweet grapes, figs, olives. Here, there is none of that. Only coarse grain, water, and occasionally scraps of meat. The way I see it, you don't need vitamins to fight in the arena. If the audience liked the show, they bet on us. If they hated it, we spent the next day getting beaten senseless by the supervisors. Fortunately, we are quite the spectacle. So everyone puts their money on us. Training begins with stretching, and if anyone pulls a muscle, he gets thrown out of the academy, useless. Why do we kill each other for the entertainment of the masses? Well, I looked at him and told him the truth. We do it because there's nothing left. We are the dregs of society, the leftovers. We are outcasts, prisoners, condemned men. We are here to die. Is there a point to it all, perhaps? A great philosopher once wrote that the purpose of life is to put on a show. Am I saying we're all actors? Maybe, but think about it. The condemned man feels alive here, the prisoner finds freedom, the outcast finds a home, and the leftovers find purpose. We may be broken men, but as long as we keep breathing, we're alive. And isn't that the greatest show of all? Next, we learn how to handle our weapons, starting with the wooden ones. When you hold a Rudy's for the first time, you feel like a god, but that feeling fades quickly. Hours of practice turn you into a master, and I've seen guys here use that sword like it's an extension of their hand. After that, it's shield work, blocking, parrying, lunging, the whole 9 yards. Once in a while, I throw in a surprise attack and watch the young gladiators panic. It's a rare sight, but every now and then you'll see a new recruit fight back. And when that happens, the lanista takes notice. And if you do, what are you doing in my academy? You should be in a farmer's field somewhere. Those whose numbers are called leave with us and never return. Sometimes they come back with scars and missing limbs. Sometimes they come back dead. If your name isn't called, you wait till next week. If you're healthy, that is, injuries are a fact of life here. A broken nose, a torn ear, a missing finger. That's a badge of honor. It tells stories of battles fought and won. But there are degrees of injuries. A man who loses an eye is done. A man with a crippled leg spends his days begging on the side of the road. And a man without hands can kiss his career goodbye. But, some slaves are picky eaters, so I go out of my way to obtain goat testicles, pork rinds, and fish eggs. They come from taverns and brothels, these women, and they bring bad habits and diseases with them. Fighting hurts. Wine eases the pain, but it also loosens your limbs, making you a slow-witted fool in the arena. Prostitutes are worse. They distract us from our training and waste our energy. A gladiator can sleep with a woman for weeks and never get tired. Then he gets up the next day and he can barely move. What's a man to do? Prostitutes and wine are the bane of my existence. I try to control it, but how? Alcohol is everywhere. Shops sell it, taverns brew it. And as for the women, well, they're cheaper than slaves, and the gladiators aren't exactly poets. This is a business after all. Food costs about 5 denarii per month per person. At any given time, I have between 200 and 300 men in various stages of training, but only a select few end up in the center of that plaque. The main attraction is the training ring. It's covered with sand, ideal for stabbing, slashing, and tripping. Slave women cover my body with olive oil, scrape it off and slap me silly. I lost count of how many scars I have, but this one across my cheek reminds me of my glory days. The hero of a story needs a good scar. Where did I learn to fight? From my father. I joined the army when I was old enough to carry a shield and quickly rose through the ranks. A chain of command knows loyalty and obedience when it sees it. Soon I was stationed in Hispania, and one fateful day I fought in the same arena where my students train. Now I can still remember the cheers of the crowd. My lieutenant fell beside me, gushing blood all over the sand. The captain shouted orders, and I knew I had to live up to my name. That day I earned the respect of my men, killed a bunch of Gauls, and the crowd started chanting, "Rufus, Rufus." The barbarians didn't stand a chance. In the corner hangs a net. Every time someone dies, we haul them up there. Looks like decoration. In fact, it's a drying rack. I need a place for injured men to recuperate. So there's a barracks, a dining hall, and surprisingly enough, a bathhouse. In the center of it all is my house. It's small, but it has its comforts, like a bed instead of a pile of hay and real food instead of porridge. The house also has a tunnel leading straight to the gladiator barracks. It comes in handy when one of my men sleeps with my wife. Now, I'm sure you're wondering how much does it cost to train a man? Depends on the size of the investment. A slave will probably run you around 30 denarii, plus whatever you pay to buy him. In the case of Spartacus, nothing. He was a gift. A free man, on the other hand, can cost you upwards of 100 denarii per day. On average, I spend about 50 denarii per person. And if you want to train that guy for 2 years, well, multiply, son, multiply. Now, not everyone makes it to the end, so that price tag keeps fluctuating. I mean, yeah, back in Greece, we had our games too, theater, poetry readings, but here in Rome, it's different. They have chariots racing around in circles, dudes killing each other, trying to pin each other down, cheering them on. Romans are shameless. How dare you call us shameless? I am a senator, a man of culture. We won't talk about chariots because they're boring. Chariots are for commoners. We'll focus on the part where men fight each other. Men, that's another story. This is about honor. Blood, guts, skill, athleticism. These are the games of the Capua. Let me explain. It's the year 80 AD and I run an academy of gladiators. Not just any academy, mind you, the best in the whole of Italy, or at least that's what my plaque says. My name is Marcus Rufus, and I make deadly men. Behind me lies the Imperial Palace, which means that my students have a chance of ending up in front of the Emperor himself. That's right. You can hire my graduates. For the next 3 hours, you can torture them, whip them, set them on fire. Throw poisonous snakes at them, whatever you want, but at sunset, they come back home to me. We train them to survive anything except death. Actually, that's probably the most important lesson they learn here. I hate when that happens. 1 minute you're having an existential conversation with a gladiator about his dreams and ambitions, and the next he's dead. Look, my profession is dangerous. 2 jobs I would rather have, public executioner or chariot racer. The secret to success here at the Ludus is numbers. Now let's talk about food. My academy sits on 5 acres of land. That's about the size of 4 basketball courts. I wake up early, take a quick leak, then hit the showers. We review the previous day's fights together with the lanista. Important moment because it determines how much money we make today. After training, we all gather around to listen to the lanista read the list of names. As the sun sets, the wives arrive carrying wine and prostitutes. Yes, you heard me right. We have prostitutes. Not long ago, a gladiator asked me, "Why do we do this?" Now check out what did ancient Rome do better than us. Or click this other video instead. You are a gladiator, the most feared warrior in the ancient world. Your very presence struck terror into the hearts of men. None were brave enough to stand against you, that is until now. You don't want to hold back, but you also don't want anyone to get hurt. How do you do both? B. Practicing your weapon skills against wooden dummies. It's not as exciting as real combat, but it's less dangerous. Unlike modern athletes, gladiators didn't specialize in one type of combat. You needed to be an expert in multiple fighting styles to succeed. Today you practice swordplay, tomorrow you practice net and trident combat, and the next day you hone your spear-throwing abilities. Let's see who's laughing then. See, tell him you'll beat him in front of the entire audience. That'll teach him. After months, maybe years of brutal training, injuries, and surviving the whims of sadistic trainers and jealous rivals, it's finally time. Others sit silently, praying to whichever gods might grant them a few more hours of breathing. The trainers hand out your weapons, real ones this time. Others were more theatrical reenactments of battles, myths, or executions. If you were unlucky, you might be thrown against wild animals, a venatio, without proper weapons. Your strength, courage, and skill in battle are unmatched. You are the undisputed king of the arena. Your fellow gladiators look up to you as a role model and the crowds adore you. Honestly, it's a surprise you survived your first fight. You may want to consider changing careers. You've earned it. Keep up the good work. But today, it's a one-on-one fight. A test of everything you've learned. You circle each other, eyes locked. The crowd is already roaring, demanding action. You make the first move, a lunge. Your opponent blocks, a slash, he ducks. It's fast, ugly, brutal. There's no music, no slow motion, just survival. Every strike drains your strength. Every miss could be your last. You manage to land a blow, a cut to his thigh. The crowd cheers. You hear your name chanted by strangers who will forget you by dinner, but it fuels you. Eventually, your opponent falls, bleeding, weak, but not dead. Now comes the moment of truth. You stand over him, sword raised. The crowd leans forward. All eyes turn to the emperor or the game's editor, the man funding today's spectacle. He raises his hand. Thumbs up means mercy. Thumbs down means death. You wait, heart pounding. He gives the signal. You obey. Blood soaks the sand. You bow, covered in sweat and crimson, and limp off the field. You've survived your first fight, but celebration is short-lived. This is Rome. There will be another match, another day, another death. You stare down at the steel in your hands, and suddenly everything feels much heavier. The medic uses wine to clean wounds and rough linen to wrap gashes. There's no time for rest. The next batch of gladiators is already being prepared. The show must go on, and so must you. You rely too much on defense and don't take enough risks. You may never be the champion, but you'll likely live a long and happy life. You're loaded onto a wagon or marched in a line under heavy guard through the crowded Roman streets. People cheer, children wave, some women blow kisses. You'd think you were a rock star, but deep down, you know they're not cheering for you. They're cheering for the blood you're about to spill or lose. You've been selected for your first real fight. Not a sparring session, not a training match. This time, you'll be stepping into the sand of the arena, maybe even the Colosseum itself. It's game day, and Rome demands blood. So which weapon do you practice with today? C. Weightlifting. After all, a gladiator needs to be strong to survive. For a challenger has come to take your title and your life. If it's the Colosseum, you're entering one of the greatest death machines ever built. Over 50,000 people packed into tiered seating. Senators, merchants, beggars, prostitutes. Rome doesn't discriminate when it comes to watching a man die. Even the emperor might be present, seated in his cushioned box, sipping wine, deciding whether your life is worth saving or squashing. You're held beneath the arena in the Hypogeum, a maze of tunnels, cells, and holding pens for animals and fighters alike. The noise above is deafening. The crowd, the drums, the clanking of armor. You're sweating through your gear. No matter how many times you've trained, nothing compares to this moment. Then a horn blares, a gate opens, and you're pushed out into the blinding sunlight. The sand is hot. The roar of the crowd swallows you whole. For a moment, you forget how to breathe. You look across the arena. Your opponent is already there, armored, armed, and just as terrified, but you can't show fear. Fear is weakness, and weakness gets you killed. The fight begins not with words, but with steel. Are you up to the challenge? Take our quiz and find out if you have what it takes to be a gladiator. You are a growing young man and require lots of food to stay healthy. B. Fruit. You like to start your day with a smile. C. Nuts. A quick bite that provides plenty of energy. You wake up early, too early really, but you're a gladiator. Sleep is a luxury you can't afford. First things first, you stretch, shake off the cobwebs, and mentally prepare for the long day ahead. Being a gladiator wasn't just about fighting. You fuel your body with a protein-rich meal of cheese, eggs, fruit, and nuts. You can't skip this important meal because, well, you need sustenance to fight another day. But what did you eat first? It was a full-time job. Training, eating, sleeping, strategizing, and perhaps most importantly, socializing all had to be done with your fellow gladiators. You love tripping up your opponents. See, the dagger, perfect for close-quarters combat. What was your preferred method of getting the blood pumping in the morning? A. Sparring with your fellow gladiators. Next up, it's breakfast. Everything. Now it's time to train. The sword, of course. The most popular weapon in the gladiator's arsenal. Be the net and trident combo. While training, one of your fellow gladiators makes fun of your fighting style. What do? A. Laugh it off. You don't have time for this nonsense. Training is hard enough as it is. B. Challenge him to a fight after practice. Your big day has finally arrived. The morning begins earlier than usual. There's a different energy in the air. Some gladiators try to joke around to mask the terror. The arena is massive. There were several kinds of matches in the arena. Some were between similarly matched opponents, a Murmillo versus a Threx, or a Ricciarius against a Secutor. Behind the arena, you're patched up, barely. If you got mostly A's, you are a true champion. If you got mostly B's, you are a skilled fighter, but perhaps a bit too cautious. If you got mostly C's, well, you're a liability. Don't forget to share this quiz with your friends and family. Thanks for watching. You survived. That's rare. Maybe more than once. Suddenly, you're a star. Maybe you win every fight. Maybe you just look good dying. Either way, people know your name now. A few fighters even became celebrities. Poets wrote about them, painted them on wine jars. The most beautiful gladiator was the subject of an entire poem. That would be Catullus, the handsome Gaul who fought in Rome around 80 BC. The crowds might adore you, but you won't enjoy any of it because you're always looking over your shoulder. No anesthesia. You just grit your teeth and hope the guy sewing you up has steady hands. All the fame, the fortune, the cheers, all the women? Or was it a fate worse than death? Even if you were a veteran, even if you'd fought hundreds of battles and killed dozens of men, entering the arena was like staring into the abyss. Some fighters lasted for years. Victors got paid, usually in the form of the money their defeated opponents had brought into the arena. That's why it was important to kill or capture him. Sometimes a wealthy spectator would pay for your outfit or sponsor your entry into the next match. But usually gladiators remained poor. Their patrons pocketed most of the profits and kept them fighting to keep making money. The more famous you became, the more dangerous you were, and when you were injured, you needed medical care, new weapons, more training. Fighting in the Roman Empire was a business. Whether you were a slave, a prisoner, a thug, or a celebrity, you were a product. The audience bought tickets to see you fight. They wanted to see blood, guts, and glory. The show must go on. And if you died, they'd find someone else to replace you. They knew when to strike, when to dodge, when to fake an injury to save their strength, how to distract their opponent, how to anticipate his next move. This took talent and training. It also helped to have size on your side. The taller, broader, and stronger you were, the better. Athletic ability was important too. Some gladiators specialized in speed, others in endurance. Some were so agile, they practically flew across the arena. Others looked like tanks, charging forward, crushing everything in their path. And then there were the fighting styles. The Thracian, the Samnite, the Murmillo, the Retiarius, the Secudo. They all had their strengths and weaknesses. The Retiarius, for example, fought with a trident and a net. Great for catching opponents off guard, but pretty useless against a shield wall. The Secutor countered that with a short sword and a big shield. He charged forward, ripping the net and stabbing the enemy. But being slow and predictable, he couldn't win against the quick and agile Murmillo. And so on. Every style depended on the skill of the fighter and the quality of his equipment. A gladiator could only be as good as his weapons allowed him to be. A bronze sword was far superior to an iron one. A leather helmet was less protective than bronze, but lighter and hotter. If you could afford the best armor and weapons, you were more likely to survive. But those cost money, a lot of money. You could hear the crowd roaring, smell the blood and sweat, feel the vibrations of the falling bodies. Each fight could be your last. One wrong move, one lost balance, one moment of weakness, and you were dead. The crowd wanted blood, more blood. To satisfy them, you had to cross that line between fear and anger. Transform yourself into something wild, ruthless, unstoppable. After that, adrenaline takes over. You don't think about anything else except the man in front of you, the one holding a trident or a net or just another sword. All you think about is survival. You push forward, swinging your weapon, trying to stay light on your feet. Your heart pounds, muscles burn. You dodge, attack, counter, hoping your opponent makes a mistake, because if he does, you'll strike. Hard, fast, and accurate, and if you win, the crowd goes wild. You raised your arms in victory. You've earned their love today, but they'll forget your name tomorrow, unless you make them remember. You have to keep winning. Keep climbing. Being immortalized in a painting or a poem wasn't bad. And some modern scholars claim that gladiators were treated better than slaves. They got free medical care, food, training, and lodging. Yeah, sure, the fighting was dangerous and deadly, but it was also highly competitive. You could work your way up from the bottom to the top, earn enough cash to buy your freedom. And a lot of them did. Of course, they usually had to wait a few years for that, fighting dozens of battles and accumulating quite a few scars along the way. If you survived as a gladiator, chances are you were either really skilled or incredibly lucky. One writer described the process this way. First they pour vinegar over the wound to cleanse it. Then with a sharp knife they cut away the useless bits of flesh. Then after boiling the severed tendons, they stitch the wound closed. Then they put on a bandage soaked in vinegar, a plaster made of bread soaked in vinegar, and a compress of old urine. Urine, by the way, was used for cleaning and even as a painkiller. Also, they set broken bones by twisting them violently until they pop back into place. Sounds delightful, right? And if you think the medical staff would take care of you afterwards, well, think again. Sometimes a doctor might patch you up and send you back into the arena to finish your fight. They wanted the show to go on. They didn't care if you lived or died. Not to mention all those injuries, cracked ribs, missing teeth, sliced ears. When you lose an eye, you're done. Gladiator games were brutal. Blood flowed like water. Injuries were common. Some guys even fought blind in one eye. Some limps forever. Some couldn't sleep without screaming. He was so adored that rich ladies left their husbands and threw themselves at the sweaty warrior. In return, he gave them roses and entertained them with his chariot, which was pulled by gay male lovers. Eventually, the poet Catullus was freed and given land near Naples. There he opened a gladiatorial school, but later went bankrupt and moved to the Greek island of Lesbos. He died there around 54 BC, probably poor and alone. Graffiti appears on the walls of alleys where you train. Celadus, the Thracian, makes the girls sigh. People recognize you when you walk through the market. They call out to you from the stands during training. You are a crowd favorite. Women swoon. Men bet on you. Little kids pretend to be you in back alley stick fights. You've got fans, and don't let it go to your head. You still sleep in a stone cell, not a palace. You still eat barley porridge, not roasted peacock. You still fight, and each time the crowd wants a bigger show, more blood, more drama. The applause can turn into boos quickly. They loved you yesterday. Today they might cheer when you die. Some gladiators, though, do get rewards, money, women, fans, and maybe even the wooden sword called a rudis, which symbolizes freedom for a slave. But most gladiators weren't so lucky. To get ahead as a fighter, you needed a patron. Someone important would help you win matches, secure better lodgings, and push for your freedom. Without a patron, you were on your own. And trust me, you'd rather have one because the more popular you were, the more dangerous you became. Fame brings rivals, both inside and outside the arena. As you climb the ladder, other fighters want your spot. The higher you rise, the more valuable you become. It's worth killing you. And people will do it. They'll stab you in the back, smash your knee with a hammer, or smash your face in while you sleep. You can't trust anyone, not the veterans pretending to teach you, not the trainer whose job is to keep you alive, not even the water girl carrying that poisoned chalice. So yeah, you might get a house, a purse, a toga, and then there was the medicine. Imagine ancient healthcare, hot knives, vinegar, and prayers. But if you did survive, would it be worth it? But whatever your strategy, you need stamina, physical and mental. The psychological toll was huge. Battles were terrifying. But how long can you keep going? Even gods get tired. But you aren't a god, are you? You are a gladiator. Gladiators weren't rich, despite what Hollywood would have you believe. Sure, the most popular ones could make bank. Every good thing must come to an end. We've all heard that saying. But when it comes to the stories of most gladiators, the saying should be, every good story must come to an end, because what happened next was always the same, death or disappearance. Buried in shallow graves, names lost, scars uncounted. The fans moved on. Rome needed fresh blood. The few who did retire often stayed close to the games. If you want to hear more stories like this, follow our channel. If you want to learn more about ancient Rome, you might want to check out the series Rome at the BBC website. Thank you for watching. They became trainers, bodyguards, or guards for corrupt senators, but even with freedom, they weren't free. They carried the weight, physical and mental. Nightmares of the arena, numbness to violence, memories that could never be erased. Some couldn't sleep unless they heard cheering. Some couldn't eat without remembering blood in their mouth. Others were not so lucky. Some were forced back into the games. Debt, political vendettas, broken promises. Even free men could be re-enslaved if a rich man had enough coin and cruelty. One wrong move and you were back in the sand. You may have entered the arena as a condemned criminal or a desperate young man trying to make something of himself, but the moment that crowd began to roar, you were someone else. You were a fighter, part of a tradition stretching back centuries. Now, every decision your masters made about you was based solely on how much money they thought you were worth. How many fights you had left in you. How big a gate you could draw at the box office. In other words, how profitable you were. For every gladiator who earned a rudes, the wooden sword given to those who fought well and retired, there were hundreds who simply vanished. Executions dressed as plays, criminals tied to burning props, dressed as mythological villains and burned to death. Gladiators thrown into naval battles called namachi. Full-size ship battles in flooded arenas, yes, real boats, real water, real drowning. Rome was hardly shy about throwing anybody overboard, especially children. Child gladiators were used too. Boys trained to kill before they had beards. Children who were small enough to be cute, but whose fighting skills were terrifying to watch. These fights were meant for lighter entertainment, which usually meant equally brutal, but with cuter screams. When Roman poets complained about child gladiators, things were getting bad. Eventually, it got so bad even Roman writers started complaining, "This is cruel, this is madness." And slowly, very slowly, the games began to fade. Christianity played a role, so did economics. Turns out funding a festival of death was expensive. By the 5th century, gladiator games were banned. Too savage, they said, too pagan. The Colossus fell silent. Its floors covered in weeds, the blood washed away by time. But the myth, that lived on. Hollywood would later reimagine gladiators as tragic heroes, brave rebels, fighters for justice. That wasn't quite the truth, but it made for great movies. In reality, they were victims of a system that needed spectacle more than it needed people. They weren't warriors by choice. They were survival stories. Some won, most didn't. And now, 2,000 years later, we still whisper their names. Not because they were mighty, but because they were human and bled so that others could cheer. And if you didn't die in combat, Rome had plenty of other creative ways to kill you. I am the host. This is the story of a city.